My mother's name was Ivy Jefferson. She was 81 years old when she died, and she was the kind of woman who ironed her pillowcases and kept a dish of wrapped butterscotch candies on the side table beside her armchair. She remembered every birthday in the family without writing a single one down. She had lived in the same house on Birchwood Lane in Portland, Oregon for 44 years. She knew the names of the neighbors' grandchildren. She grew tomatoes in the summer and put up preserves in the fall. And the smell of her kitchen, cinnamon, is the smell I have always associated with the word safe. She raised two daughters, me, Pearl, and my sister, Lacey. We were different from the start, Lacey and I, in the way that siblings sometimes are, as though the family produced one temperament and then, just to see what would happen, tried the opposite. I was the one who left Portland. I studied accounting at the University of Washington, built a career in financial management in Seattle, married a quiet man named Gerard, and had two sons who are currently obsessed with baseball and Lego in that order. I came home for Thanksgiving and Christmas and the occasional summer weekend. I called my mother every Sunday morning without fail, and I loved her deeply from a distance of 180 miles. Lacey never left Portland. That was always presented by Lacey and eventually by everyone, as a sacrifice. The devoted daughter, the one who stayed while I was building my life in Seattle. Lacey was here, close to Mom, taking her to doctor's appointments, managing the house maintenance, handling the grocery runs when Mom's hip made driving uncomfortable, being present in all the daily, unglamorous ways that distance prevents. I was grateful for this. I regularly told Lacey so. I sent money when major expenses came up, the roof repair in 2019, the furnace replacement the following winter. I never questioned where it went. It was going toward our mother's comfort and care. I trusted that completely. I trusted Lacey completely. That trust was the most expensive mistake of my life. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me take you back to where it really began, not to my mother's death, but to a Sunday phone call about 18 months before it. The call that, when I look back now, contained the first thread I should have pulled. It was a March morning. I had my coffee, my phone, my Sunday ritual. Mom picked up on the second ring, as she always did. We talked about the usual things, my boys, her tomato seedlings, whether Gerard's back was better. And then somewhere in the middle of it, she said something that snagged in me like a rough edge. Lacey had me sign some papers this week, she said in the same tone she used to discuss the weather. What kind of papers? Oh, something to do with the finances. She said it would make things easier for when I'm gone, you know. She explained it all very clearly. Mom, what did you sign? There was a small pause. I wrote it down somewhere. A power of something. Power of attorney? That's it. She said it just means she can handle things if I'm not able to. Medical things, financial things. I sat with this. Power of attorney is not inherently alarming. Plenty of families set it up as a practical measure for aging parents, but something about the casual, offhand way my mother mentioned it, she explained it all very clearly, produced a quiet unease in me, because my mother wasn't a woman who let things wash over her without understanding them. She had balanced her own household accounts for 40 years. She was sharp, and the fact that she couldn't immediately remember what she'd signed, but remembered that it had been explained to her clearly, suggested that the explanation had been designed to reassure rather than to inform. Mom, I'd like to see a copy of that document. Oh, Lacey has it. She keeps all the papers organized. You know how she is. I did know how she was. That was precisely the problem. I called Lacey that evening. I heard Mom signed a power of attorney, I said without accusation. She did. It's a full financial and medical power of attorney. Honestly, Pearl, it's just sensible at her age. I was going to mention it. When? She paused for a brief moment. When it was relevant. It's not a big deal. Can you send me a copy? Of course. I'll dig it out this week. She didn't send it that week or the week after. When I asked again, she said her printer was broken. When I offered to have it emailed, she said she'd have to find the file. The copy arrived 6 weeks later after a third request. It was a photograph of the document taken at an angle that made several sections difficult to read. I printed it anyway. I read what I could, then I put it in a drawer and told myself I was being paranoid. I wasn't being paranoid, I was being slow. Over the next 12 months, things shifted in ways that were individually explainable and collectively alarming. Occasionally, my mother began to mention that she wasn't sure where things stood with the house. Not in a worried way, in a vague way. Lacey says not to worry about it. Lacey's handling all of that. My mother, who had always known exactly where she stood on every financial matter, had stopped knowing, and she had stopped knowing in a way that felt deliberate, as though the knowing had been gently, carefully removed from her. I started asking different questions on our Sunday calls. Not obvious ones, just gentle ones. How had the week been? Had she needed anything? Had anyone come to visit? Lacey visited frequently, sometimes daily, I gathered, which was, on the surface, devoted and admirable. But some of my mother's mentions of these visits had a different quality to them, a slight flatness, a sense that she was reporting rather than reminiscing. Lacey brought lunch on Wednesday. We went through some things. What kind of things, Mom? Papers. She had a lot of papers. I get tired going through all those papers. Something cold moved through me. In November of that year, I drove to Portland unannounced. I told myself I just missed her, which was true. I didn't tell myself the other reason because I wasn't ready to admit it yet. My mother was delighted to see me. We sat in her kitchen with its cinnamon warmth, and she made us tea. We talked for 2 hours. She was herself, bright and sharp and full of small, vivid observations about the neighbors and the weather, and whether Gerard was eating properly. But when I mentioned the house, asking lightly whether she'd had any thoughts about what she wanted to do with it eventually, something shifted in her face. Lacey and I talked about that, she said. She thinks it makes more sense for her to have a plan in place. She said it would save on probate, save on taxes. She had a lawyer explain it. Mom, has anything changed about who owns the house? There was a long pause. My mother looked at her tea. I think Lacey's name might be on it now, for practical reasons. She explained it all to me. I kept my voice steady. When did that happen? Last spring, I think, or summer. It was around when the roses came in. I sat in my mother's kitchen in November, looking at the roses outside the window, bare now, pruned back for winter, and I understood with absolute clarity that I had been too slow, that I needed to move now. I drove back to Seattle on Sunday evening, went to my office on Monday morning, and didn't open my regular work files. Instead, I opened my browser and looked up the Oregon Public Property Records System. It took 11 minutes to find the deed transfer for 14 Birchwood Lane, Portland, Oregon. Ivy Margaret Jefferson had transferred ownership of the property to Lacey Louise Jefferson Webb 14 months earlier. The transfer had been recorded as a gift transfer. The assessed value of the property at the time was $420,000. I sat very still. Then I hired a lawyer. Her name was Rebecca Marsh. She specialized in elder financial abuse. I didn't use that phrase when I first called her office. It felt too large, too accusatory. But she used it within the first 10 minutes of our conversation. And she used it with a quiet matter-of-factness that told me she had seen this before. Many times before. Tell me everything, she said. From the beginning. I told her everything. The power of attorney, the angled photograph, the paper sessions that tired my mother out, the house transfer, the 14 months of small changes that I had individually explained away and which laid end to end formed a clear and deliberate pattern. Rebecca listened quietly. When I finished, she said, I'm going to need you to gather documentation. Everything you can access, and I'm going to need your mother's financial records going back at least 2 years. Lacey controls her accounts. Your mother controls her accounts, Rebecca corrected. Lacey has authority over them via the power of attorney. That's a meaningful distinction, because what we're going to do is establish that your mother didn't fully understand what she was authorizing. Can you get me a copy of the power of attorney, a proper one, not a photograph? I'll try. Also, and this is important, when you talk to your mother, don't alarm her. Don't tell her what you're doing. People in Lacey's position, when they feel the walls closing in, sometimes move very quickly to secure what they've taken. We need to understand the full picture before anything is disturbed. I nodded, though she couldn't see me. Understood? Pearl, she paused. This is more common than people know, and from the outside, it almost always looks like love. I held on to that. I needed to hold on to it. Rebecca's team requested my mother's bank records through a formal legal process that my mother, bless her sharp, trusting heart, willingly authorized once Rebecca explained it to her directly in plain language, over a cup of tea in her kitchen on a cold January afternoon. I was there for that conversation. I had driven down again, this time with a purpose I was ready to name. My mother listened to Rebecca. She was quiet for a long time afterward. Then she looked at me and said, You think Lacey has been taking from me? I think we need to look at the records and find out what's true, I said. That's all. Mom nodded slowly. All right, she said. Let's look. The records took 2 weeks to compile. When they came back, Rebecca walked me through them on a video call with a screen share and the steady, unshockable manner of a professional who needs to deliver very bad news very clearly. Over a period of 22 months, beginning 3 months after the power of attorney was signed, a total of $218,000 had been withdrawn from Mom's savings and investment accounts. The withdrawals were structured in amounts below the reporting threshold. They were regular and systematic. They had been made by Lacey using the financial power of attorney. The house transfer valued at $420,000 had been recorded as a gift, and no gift tax return had been filed. The money I had sent for the roof repair and the furnace, a combined total of $22,000, had passed through my mother's account and out again within days of arrival. Mom's estate, which had once represented 44 years of careful living and a paid-off house, had been reduced by more than $600,000. I closed my laptop when the call ended and sat in my home office for a long time without moving. Gerard came in eventually and sat across from me without asking anything because he knows me well enough to know when to be quiet. After a while I said, "It's worse than I thought." He nodded. "She took everything, Gerard. Everything Mom spent her whole life building." He came around the desk and put his hand on my shoulder. I let myself, for exactly 5 minutes, feel the full weight of what my sister had done. Then I picked up my phone and called Rebecca. "How do we get it back?" I said. "I want to tell you about the day I sat across from Lacey and watched her face as she realized I knew everything, because it was the most important conversation of my life." It was a Saturday in February. I had driven to Portland. Rebecca had advised me to have this conversation with Lacey before the legal process formally commenced, partly to give Lacey the opportunity to respond, and partly because my mother, who still loved her younger daughter despite everything, had asked me to. I met Lacey at a coffee shop on Burnside, neutral ground. She came in looking guarded but composed. She'd always been good at composed and sat down across from me and said, "What's this about Pearl? You were very mysterious on the phone." I put a folder on the table. "I want to talk about Mom's finances," I said. There was a flicker, then she said, "There's nothing to talk about. I handle Mom's finances. That's been the arrangement for years. I've had Mom's bank records pulled, 2 years of them." A longer pause. Her eyes went to the folder. "On what authority?" "On Mom's authority. She asked me to look into things. Her words, Lacey, let Pearl have a look." Something moved behind her composure, a hairline crack. "The records show $218,000 withdrawn from her accounts over 22 months, I said. "I'd like you to tell me where that money went." "Expenses?" she said immediately, too immediately. "Her care costs money, Pearl. You're in Seattle. You don't see it. The appointments, the medications, the help I have to bring in. The withdrawals are in amounts of $9,000 each," I said. "Made at regular intervals. That's a structured pattern, Lacey. My lawyer calls it structuring." The word lawyer landed like a stone in still water. "Your lawyer." Her voice had changed. Something cold had come into it. "You hired a lawyer to come after your own sister." "I hired a lawyer to protect our mother." "I am protecting our mother. I have been here every single day while you were in Seattle with your perfect life and your perfect family, sending money twice a year and calling it enough. Do you have any idea what it costs to care for an elderly woman, physically, emotionally? Do you have any idea what I have given up?" She was angry now. The composure had broken, and what was underneath it was hot and rehearsed. Arguments she had clearly prepared, justifications she had been building for a long time. "Whatever you have given up," I said, "doesn't entitle you to $218,000 from her accounts, a $420,000 property transfer, and the $22,000 I sent for the roof and the furnace." There was silence, a full airless silence. "The house," she began, "was transferred without Mom's informed consent. Rebecca has spoken with Mom directly. Mom didn't understand that she was signing away ownership. She thought she was signing something to do with probate planning. That's not true. I explained everything to her." "You explained it in a way that she didn't understand. There's a legal term for that too." Lacey sat back. Something had gone out of her, the heat, the prepared indignation. What was left was a kind of smallness I had never seen in my sister before. "What are you going to do?" she said quietly now. "That depends on you," I said. "Rebecca has filed a formal complaint with the Oregon Adult Protective Services. That process is already in motion, and I can't stop it. But what happens legally, whether this becomes a civil recovery action or something more serious, depends significantly on what you choose to do next." More serious. She understood what I meant. "The DA's office has been notified. The structured withdrawals alone constitute a reportable pattern. The property transfer, given the circumstances, may constitute fraud." I paused. "I don't want to put you in prison, Lacey. I want to put Mom's money back where it belongs. Help me do that, and Rebecca will advocate for the most civil resolution possible. Don't help me, and I will let the law do what it does." She looked at the folder on the table between us, then she looked at me. "I didn't think of it as stealing," she said, and her voice, for the first time in the whole conversation, sounded like my sister, like the real one, underneath all the architecture of what she'd become. "I know," I said, "but it was." Mom died 8 months after that Saturday on Burnside. She died peacefully in her own bed on Birchwood Lane, the house that, following a civil settlement negotiated by Rebecca, had been transferred back to her name. The $218,000 was repaid in a structured agreement that would follow Lacey for years. The $22,000 came back too. My mother knew what had happened. We had been honest with her carefully and kindly, in stages because she deserved honesty more than she deserved the comfortable fiction that both her daughters had always been who she thought they were. She cried once when it was explained clearly, just once. And then she dried her eyes and said, Well, at least I know. She updated her will in March. She was clear-minded and unequivocal. Her attorney of 40 years sat with her through every clause. When the will was read after a small, quiet funeral, attended by people who had known Ivy Jefferson for decades and loved her with the straightforward affection that communities build over long years. When the will was read, Lacey received a single item, the dish of butterscotch candies from the side table beside the armchair. I received the house, the remaining estate, and a handwritten letter that I keep in the drawer of my nightstand and have read more times than I can count. I won't share all of it, but its last line says, "You came when it mattered. That is the truest thing a person can do." I cried for a week after she died, not just for losing her though, that was enormous, and it still is, but for the complexity of what I was left with. Because Lacey is still my sister. She is still the girl who shared my childhood bedroom, and who used to crawl into my bed during thunderstorms, who once drove 4 hours in the middle of the night when my first serious relationship ended badly, and I called her from a gas station crying. People contain multitudes. The person who loves you and the person who wrongs you can be the same person. Holding both of those things at once is the hardest work I have ever done. I am still doing it. If you have an elderly parent, if you love someone who is aging, I need you to hear what I am about to say very carefully. Because this story is not unusual. Rebecca told me so, and the statistics bear it out. The most common perpetrators of elder financial abuse are family members, not strangers, not scammers calling from overseas. People who are trusted, people who are present, people who, from the outside, look like the devoted ones. The signs were there, and I want to name them for you. The first sign was the sudden signing of legal documents without the knowledge or involvement of other family members. A power of attorney is not inherently dangerous, but it should never be arranged in secret. Every immediate family member should know when one is being established, who it covers, and what it authorizes. If one family member is arranging legal authority over a parent without telling the others, ask why immediately. The second sign was my mother's vagueness about things she had previously been clear about. She had always known her financial situation. When she stopped knowing, I should have moved faster. Confusion in a previously sharp person, around financial matters specifically, is a warning sign worth investigating. The third sign was the inaccessibility of documents. A photograph taken at an angle, delays, broken printers, lost files. When someone in a position of financial authority over a vulnerable person is resistant to sharing documentation with other family members, that resistance is itself information. The subtle isolation, never dramatic, but real. Daily visits that tired my mother out. Papers to sign, decisions made. A parent who increasingly says Lacey handles all of that is a parent who has gradually and deliberately been removed from the decision-making about her own life. If you recognize any of this, here is what I want you to do. Request an independent conversation with your parent without the managing sibling present. Ask open questions. Listen for vagueness where there used to be clarity. Pull the public property records for any real estate your parent owns. They are available in most jurisdictions online for free, in minutes. Contact an elder law attorney. You don't need to have proof to make that call. You need a concern. That's enough. Don't wait. Don't tell yourself you are being paranoid. And don't let the appearance of devotion substitute for the reality of scrutiny. Love and exploitation can live in the same person. I know that now. I wish I had known it sooner. Mom spent 44 years building something. She deserved to leave it as she chose. In the end, she did, but it took a fight, a long, painful, loving fight to make that possible. She was worth every moment of it. If you're watching this and something in this story has touched a fear you've been carrying, please act on it today, not tomorrow. And if you have someone in your life who needs to hear this story, share it with them. It might be the most important thing they watch this year. Subscribe to our channel. We tell the stories that matter, the ones people live through in silence. You are never alone in what you are carrying. Leave us a comment. How did this story make you feel? And have you ever suspected something was wrong in your own family and looked the other way? Tell us. We're listening. We'll see you in the next one. Take care, and God bless.